Hi, I'm Dr. Walter Matwichuk. The purpose of today's intermittent reinforcement email message is to tell you one problem people sometimes get into when using REBT. REBT acknowledges the presence of unhealthy negative emotions and healthy negative emotions and shows people that our unhealthy negative emotions emanate from our rigid and extreme attitudes. We encourage people to then spot their unhealthy negative emotions and then challenge their rigid and extreme attitudes. The problem is some people will deny the presence of an unhealthy negative emotion and not take steps to do self-therapy. Now, in today's email, I go over some of the self-defeating attitudes that leads to mistaking or not identifying your unhealthy emotions. You need to accept yourself unconditionally. And when in fact people have the attitude, I should not be experiencing emotional disturbance, they'll tend to deny the fact that they're disturbed and they can't help themselves. And so denying your emotional disturbance is not going to free you to examine the attitudes that underpin it. Secondly, sometimes people will hold the attitude, I'm a lesser person for disturbing myself, or it's too threatening to acknowledge that I have this emotional problem, so I'll deny its existence. Finally, they may even think it's too hard to work on the self-defeating emotional reaction that they're having, or it's too hard to relinquish some of the rigid and extreme attitudes that underpin their emotional disturbance. So the first step to really using REBT effectively is to allow yourself to have emotional upset. You need to get rid of this idea that you're not supposed to get upset, that it's somehow a reflection of your personal worthlessness or your weakness. Psychotherapists will sometimes think this, like, I know REBT and therefore I should never get upset. The originator of REBT, Albert Ellis, used to often acknowledge statements like, oh, I realized I was upset and I said to myself, you're angry, now give up the demand. So what I'm trying to encourage you to do in today's email is to first understand that it's very self-defeating to deny that you're emotionally upset about something. And it's easy to do in REBT because we're going to encourage you to have healthy negative emotions. And people will sometimes say they're only concerned when in fact they're anxious. And one of the ways that you can understand the difference between a healthy and unhealthy negative emotion is to recognize that unhealthy negative emotions lead to self-defeating behavior. They often lead to avoidance behavior, or they lead to aggressive behavior, or they lead to denial. And so one of the ways to spot your unhealthy negative emotions is to look for the urge you have when you're under the influence of a negative emotion and see whether or not the urge or the subsequent behavior is a constructive behavior or a self-defeating behavior. When you notice that you are upsetting yourself, it's good to acknowledge it and then trace back your rigid and extreme attitudes. But you have to allow yourself to be a fallible human who will occasionally disturb themselves, even once you get good at rational emotive behavior therapy. So I appeal to you to read today's intermittent reinforcement email message, and more importantly, I appeal that you be honest with yourself when you're disturbing yourself and you don't sweep your emotional disturbance under the rug, and you bring it out for examination and you look at the attitudes that underpin your emotional disturbance. Remember, REBT recognizes that you're a fallible human and you'll have two competing tendencies, one to disturb yourself and one to help yourself and adapt to adversity. And recognize that it's often very easy for humans to disturb themselves. And so there's no shame in acknowledging that you're disturbing yourself. The first step in overcoming emotional disturbance is to acknowledge its existence and not to put yourself down for disturbing yourself. Same thing with a self-defeating behavior. The first step in overcoming a self-defeating behavior is not to down yourself for having it. Once you accept yourself unconditionally and accept even your laziness sometimes to work hard at changing your self-defeating behavior, once you acknowledge and accept yourself with the behavior and with all the different self-defeating behaviors you may have, you're taking the first step towards changing that self-defeating behavior, overcoming it. I would also like to remind you that every Saturday I'll hold a Zoom demonstration where I discuss with a volunteer an unhealthy behavior or an unhealthy negative emotion and show them how to identify the rigid and extreme attitudes that are linked to this self-defeating emotional response or this self-defeating behavior. After 40 minutes, I take questions from the audience. It's free to attend. It's on Zoom at 9 a.m. here in New York every Saturday, and you too can attend by getting the link. You can write to me at rebtdoctor@gmail.com. That's rebtdoctor@gmail.com. I hope to see you on Saturday, and I hope you also accept yourself with your emotional disturbance so you could then do something about it in a healthy way.